Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Today we have with us one of my wonderful friends, Chantel Lockwood. We have known each other for a while since we were in grad school together. And then after we graduated, we worked for the same family therapy agency. Chantel is definitely a seeker with a lot of spiritual gifts. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that with her today. She is the owner of Chantel's Life Coaching and Counseling Services located in Central New York. She's an amazing mama to two sweet littles who seem to have some stories of their own with the unexplained. So, welcome to the show, Chantel. Thank you so much
Thank
for being here.
thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you too. I know that this is going to be a great conversation, so I've been looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. And what's great is that you haven't heard any of this before. Like, because I know sometimes on podcasts, you can kind of tell when there's like a pre interview and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, whereas I feel like you're going to get kind of that reaction that everybody else is going to have, where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of a cool story. So I think that's exciting because I'm
Yeah.
like, are you going to give me some questions? It's like, no, we're just going to meet and talk, like, just like we're having coffee. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So tell
Yeah.
us about, I know that you are a pretty spiritual person. So tell us about like your spiritual journey. Like where did that all start for you?
So I went to like what I would consider like a pretty traditional church growing up. I went to an American Baptist church and then I went to a congregational church. We switched to that church when I was in middle school. So that's a United Church of Christ. And but I always felt like my mom was always a little outside the box when it came to um her spiritual beliefs. And I'll never forget when like there was this like huge uproar at my childhood church when my mom got this book Embraced by the Light by Betty Eady. This was in the I think the early 90s, and it was all about this woman's near death experience. And I remember like the minister at that church basically freaked out. And it was just like, what? Whereas I
Wow.
thought it was kind of neat. And that book was everywhere. That was on 2020. There were a lot of people talking about it at the time. And so I essentially grew up in this house where it was pretty open minded. My dad, learned about hypnotherapy when I was in ninth grade. He was super into UFOs. Like my entire childhood, he loved like talking about stuff, like looking at the stars. And of course, we watched the X Files and Unsolved Mystery. I mean, I'm saying of course, but like I don't know if most people even watch those shows. But that's the kind of stuff that I grew up on. So I think it was a very open-minded house. Um, and so I say that because I don't believe that my beliefs were ever limited or stifled because of that. And and I remember, so I was 16 years old. It was my first like real summer job, and I was cleaning and painting apartments at this apartment complex in Watertown, New York, where I'm originally from, like upstate New York. And so I'm talking with the manager of this apartment complex, and her name was Lori. And sometimes, like, she would just be like, "Oh, if you need more water, like, come into my apartment and you can fill up your water." Like, she was just very, like, she was older. I think she was like in her 30s or 40. I don't think that's not old now, but when you're 16, you're
Yeah,
like,
back then.
yeah. But so
Context, yeah.
yeah, but I felt like we were good friends or we became friends. And what ended up happening was I looked at her bookshelf and she had this book, The Celestine Prophecy. And I was like, oh, that's cool. My mom has that book. And so it was just like that moment. Like, do you ever do that where you look at somebody's bookshelf and you're like, we can be friends because
Yes.
we have similar, yeah. So I think there's something to that. And so I then she said something about I don't even know where exactly it came into play in our conversations or whatever. Um, but she said something about being psychic. And I was like, well, I don't really, like, what does that even mean? And I would say at that time, I was open minded, but I was definitely skeptical because I had never had any experiences with like a psychic reading, or I knew nothing of like tarot cards, anything like that. And so I said, well, how do you know? And she's like, oh, I take a piece of somebody's jewelry, and I'm just going to take a pen so we can, and I hold it up to my head and I close my eyes. And then something comes into my mind and I tell the person, and I'm going, like, this doesn't even sound real. Right. So I said, and she goes, well, why don't you try? So she does it. She takes my necklace, she holds it up to her head, and she tells me some things. I'm like, actually, that was pretty accurate. So I'm starting to be less skeptical and more of believer. And and then she said, well, why don't you try? And I was like, what? So I took like her ring or something and I held it up and I was like, I am not seeing anything. This is so stupid. And and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow. And she goes, no, no, just tell me what you see. Don't overthink it. Just tell me what you see. And I'm like, okay, blue skies, puffy white clouds. And I said, oh, I'm seeing a beach. And I'm seeing a guy driving a red convertible, the top's down, and he's driving on a road alongside the beach. And I was like, I'm making this up. Like, I gave her ring back and I was like, have a nice day. I'm just making this up. And she goes, no, keep going. And I'm like, well, why? And she told me that one of her near and dear friends wanted to set her up with this guy who was an insurance agent. Oh, that was the other thing. The guy was wearing a linen suit. I mean, this takes us way back, right, to the 90s. But, and I thought, and she goes, he's an insurance agent. So he wears a suit to work. And she said, and he drives a red convertible. And I was like, what? Right. And then from there, I go to I'm in high school and I'm like giving people readings. Like, who wants a reading today? We'd be like at tennis practice and I'd be like sitting over in the corner and giving people readings. And I just didn't know anything. It was just whatever came to my mind, I would tell them.
So
And
you're during that time when you're doing it in high school, you're using the same method of I'm putting things up to
yeah,
my
putting
head. Okay.
something of theirs up,
Hmm.
typically a piece of jewelry. Like, I guess my understanding of it was it had their energy or their
Hmm.
essence or something on it. So I was like, well, and but then once I opened myself up to that, like once I was like, it was, I mean, my eyes literally just crossed right now, like trying to describe this to you because it's such a weird feeling to go from like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like you don't see it. It's like in the book The Giver, or in the movie The Giver, where it's like everything's in black and white.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden you're seeing stuff in color. And so it wasn't that dramatic of a transformation, but it was
Hmm.
just like all of a sudden I was seeing like flashes of light out of the corner of my eye. I was seeing shit everywhere. Like, it was a little, when I think back to it, it was unsettling, but I definitely felt afraid
Okay.
because I think when we are open to that kind of stuff, it's like if you want to be selectively open to it.
Hmm.
Like, I even think about like those people that do like the ghost hunters type shows. I'm like, how are those ghosts not following you home?
Hmm.
Like, because I just get kind of, I don't know. It was very unsettling because I was singing in my church choir and all of a sudden I see this skull come out of the wall and I'm just singing and I'm like, what the hell was that? And then it like disappears back into the wall. And then So this is after I have this reading, I'm like, oh no, like what did, and I, once you open, it's almost like opening a portal or something. Like once you
Hmm.
open it, there's no, it's hard to know, like, unless you have like specialized training, unless you talk to
Right.
somebody that knows what they're doing, like you don't know how to turn it off. And here I
Hmm.
was 16 years old. I had no idea like what I was doing.
Hmm.
And then there was another instance. I wrote down a couple of things because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget stuff, but I startled easily. I felt scared a lot. I started sleeping with the lights on because this one night I'm laying in bed and I just had a feeling or a sense that someone was in my bedroom. And I'm like, that's weird. So, I open up an eye and there is a woman floating across my bedroom floor. And then she disappears into my mirror that's on my full length mirror that's on
Hmm.
my wall. And I'm like, okay, sleeping with the lights on from now on. And then my mom
Hmm.
was like, why are you sleeping with the lights on? And I'm just like, I just feel scared. It's hard to explain to some, my mom and I were pretty close, but like it's hard to explain that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I just didn't really tell her a lot, when it came to that. So,
And plus, when you're a
um,
teenager, you're less
yeah,
likely to open up to your parents anyways about what's
yeah.
going on. So, I
Oh, for
mean,
sure.
that makes sense.
Right. I mean, if it had something to do with like UFOs, I could definitely talk to my dad about it. But like
Yeah.
this was just,
I'm seeing
I,
skulls at church.
I'm
Like, how do you explain that to your mom?
oh, and then oh, there was another instance where I was in downtown Watertown and I was at a stoplight and there was this guy, glasses, like an old, basically like a maybe a 1940s type of like suit, tie, the ha- wasn't that the era where everybody wore a hat? I think I'm so this guy is walking pretty closely behind. So this this unliving thing, this guy is walking behind somebody that's living. And I remember talking to my mom about that, and she said, "Well, why didn't you pull your car over and like say something?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't sure the two were even connected. It didn't feel like they were even
Hmm.
connected. So plus, I'm like, am I really going to pull my car over and be like, "Ooh, psychic drive-by time, like, hey, somebody is following you," So I wasn't gonna do that. But I also started seeing like auras and um but if somebody's aura color was off, like I just didn't feel like it was my place to say something to somebody. So I just like wouldn't. But a lot of my friends were like, what color is my aura? And that was the same summer that the Watertown Daily Times, the local newspaper, ran an article about auras and different aura colors and what they mean. So I was like, hey, that's like not a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences.
Hmm.
So there was that. Um, and then if we go way, way back, I remember like my first instance with being like, someone is in this room. And my cousin, who is 5 years older than me, and then my brother, who's 2 years older than me, would say the same thing. So when we would spend the night at our grandma's house or our grandparents' house, in one of her guest bedrooms, there was this creepy looking clown doll. It's so funny to even talk about because it's so ridiculous. But when you're a kid, you're like, and so it was a clown and it was on a swing and it was in the corner. And I mean, it wasn't just me, it was my cousin and my brother. All three of us were like, we don't want to sleep in that room, grandma. Like, can you please take the clown doll out? And she was like, it's fine. But I'm telling you, like, there was definitely some kind of energy or presence in that room. I don't know if it was connected to the clown doll. I'm not even sure whatever happened to that. That thing's long gone now, but that was probably one of my first feelings of like, okay, this is unsettling. Like there's something in this room that's maybe more of like a negative energy. And
Hmm.
I remember feeling really scared about it.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
What do
But
you think
yeah,
about the experience, the first time that you held up the piece of jewelry to your head? Like, why do you think that opened you up? Do you have any theories?
I think because part of me, well, I was going to say part of me was skeptical, but part of me was open minded. Um, but I think I've always been intuitive.
Hmm.
Um, I always had a sense for, things that were happening. Um, like one time in first grade, I asked my aunt, like, how come you and Larry live together, but you're not married? And my aunt, like, was very, very upset with my parents and was like, clearly you were talking to her, and she overheard your conversation and you don't agree with our relationship and that we're not married but living together. And my mom was like, no, like, have you met Chantel? Like, these are the kinds of questions that she asks. So it's but clearly that I was picking up on something
Hmm.
there. I was picking up on perhaps an insecurity that my aunt had about being with this person that she loved and not being married. And then she told me a lot, years later, how important it was for her that they got married. And they did. And they're still married to today. But I've always had a very creative imagination. And one of my cousins had said to me, when you were a little girl, you were always having little conversations. You were always maybe talking to someone that wasn't there.
Do you
And
remember
I
doing that?
I don't have any awareness of doing that. No. And what's weird is like I grew up in a really, really old house. I think it was built in 1822.
That's
Wow.
And
very old.
it's really old. And I mean, I remember being scared of mice. Like, is there going to be a mouse in my bed? Oh, I do have, well, it's not a ghost story. I could share it if you
Yeah,
want.
go for
You can edit it out if it's not.
it.
But so I was probably 4 years old at the time, and I had Winnie the Pooh themed curtains in my bedroom. And I woke up and my curtains were on fire. And I screamed, and my parents rushed into the room and they turned on the light, and my curtains were not on fire, but I swear to you, there were sticks. Instead of curtains, there were sticks, and it was a flame. And
Wow.
I still remember that to this day.
Hmm.
That sense of like, now in hindsight, I could probably say maybe in a past life I was burned at the stake or something, because I'm like, that is such a vivid image and
Yeah.
thing that happened. But
Yeah.
yeah. And then my dad was like, we're getting her a nightlight. And they did. But I don't ever remember like, I don't, there was never like, I'd love to be able to say like, oh, there was like a little boy that lived in the house and would roll his ball down the hallway and I would roll it back. Like there was never a story
Hmm.
like that or anything that I recall. But it was a really old house. So, and I think it
Hmm.
always had a really good energy to it. So, yeah.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, so you're opening up at, 16 years old. Where did it go from there for you? Like discovering these psychic abilities that you have?
Yeah. So my mom started to at that right around that time, my mom started to see a local psychic named Penny. And then I don't know how she got linked up with Sheila Applegate, but Sheila Applegate at the time was primarily doing Reiki workshops, and then spiritual readings. Or see, here's the thing is that, as you know, Brittany, like language can bring us together and language can also divide us. And so if there's anything that I say that doesn't resonate to somebody, then it's okay. Like let it go. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So
Mm-hmm.
there's, so I might say psychic, but really at the time, I think she called them intuitive readings or spiritual readings. She called herself a spiritual seer because she's clairvoyant, meaning she can see, versus people who are clairaudient who can hear things. So my mom started going to Sheila, and then it was when I was in college. So I was 19 when I met Sheila Applegate, and I went to a workshop with my mom, and um, and then I ended up having a reading with Sheila, and she was like, "Your mom told me that you've been doing spiritual readings or psychic readings for people," and she essentially coached me on it, like, you know, your third eye is wide open and you need to like close it when you're not in a reading and open it when you are in a reading. And, you're away at college, like make sure you're not like drinking and at a party and doing readings for people because it's going to open you up to things that are not going to be good for you. And I was like, oh, so she taught me a lot. And well, she taught me everything as far as like how to essentially hone in my gift and to use it in a way that was helpful instead of harmful, to myself and others. And she was the one that said no psychic drive-bys. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you, and I still have experiences like this. Like I'm like at a coffee shop and like I'll just get a flash and I can essentially see somebody's divorce or something. And it's like, that is not my business to share that with that person. Like if they want to have a reading with me, like contact me and I will give you a reading,
Mm-hmm.
or I can send you to somebody that, that can give you a reading. But I'm not just going to go up and tell somebody something, because that's just none of my business.
Right.
And so I like the term psychic drive-by, no
Yeah.
psychic drive-bys.
Has there ever been a time where you felt like I really need, like there was an urge that you really needed to? Or has it
Yeah.
always been kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna leave that?
Yeah. Yeah. I told somebody something and I never talked to him again. It just wasn't a good, it was like, oh, I know why this is happening. It's because in your past life, this is the scenario. And now you feel like in this life, you have to make it up to her. You have to make it right. And I just never heard from her again. Like I was like, oh my God, I really messed up but in my gut, like it was as if the it was as if I couldn't hold the words in. That's
Mm-hmm.
how badly the information needed to come out. So I guess on some level she needed to hear it, but
Yeah.
she
A
wasn't
seed was
her
planted,
her
but
higher self was ready to hear it, but her earthly self was not
yeah.
ready. So, but yeah, so from there, at 19, at 20, I mean, I got my level one Reiki, then my level two. I became a Reiki master in 2003. I was still in college. I started giving Reiki to people. And I mean, we were all like broke college students. So I would just give people Reiki for free. Like, oh, you hurt your calf muscle at the gym. All right. And and really whoever wanted a reading, like I would just do it. And then I think I started to charge people like $40 to $60, like whatever you feel comfortable. And that was for a full hour reading. So that was like, but that was way back in the day. That was like 20 years ago now.
It was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was good, especially being in college. So I mean, I don't do as many readings now. I don't even really advertise for them, but I'll do them if people ask. So
Is there a
um
reason why you don't do it as much now?
yeah, so that's a good question, by the way. I'll compare it to somebody who goes to the emergency department versus somebody who like regularly goes to the doctor
Hmm.
for their medical condition. So what happens was people would call me or email me for a reading and they would be like almost like desperate, like I need insight on this. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I've got a big life decision. I don't know what to do. I know. And I'm like, and I'm the kind of person where I'm like, everybody is intuitive. It's just you have to know that and be able to tap into it. And there's 100 different ways to say intuition or being intuitive. It's that gut feeling, it's that mother's intuition or that woman's intuition. But men can also be highly intuitive too. So I don't want to say women's intuition and limit, you know, um, men
Right.
either.
Right.
So,
Well, I think the men are taught to not acknowledge anything like that.
right,
We're trained. You're trained not to say as much. You're trained to have a monotone voice. You're trained to ignore feelings of any kind. Like, I mean,
mm-hmm,
that's just what the society that we have. It's not as bad as it was 60 years ago.
Mhm.
Things are different than they were in the past, but realistically, you are trained as a male to just shut up and go to work,
right. And like you're
walk
allowed
the
to get
dog.
angry, but you're not really allowed
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
express
that's
any other emotion. Don't cry.
that's the
Yeah.
emotion you get. You get anger
Mm-hmm.
and like occasional surprise, and that's what it is. And again, it is not as bad as it was. Things have
Right.
changed over time, but
Yeah.
there's a long way to go, I think. And I do think that, and this is way off topic, but a lot of my friends who have kids, I've been happy to see that they are training their kids differently than when I was a kid. So I'm 42, so I'm old enough that they still paddled kids in school when I went to elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Um, I mean that's well, I'm also from the South, so they did it longer there than they did in the North by a couple of years. But like the things are different in that aspect too. So hopefully getting better. Hopefully in the future those tropes won't be that way, but they definitely still are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're right. Things are changing and adapting. And simply put, we are evolving as human beings, as spiritual beings. And so therefore it makes sense that our how we parent our children is also going to evolve. Like,
Mhm.
and the same thing with being in school and also embracing all of those emotions and saying like, I mean, every single therapy client, if I say, I'm like, here's an example of an invalidating statement, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And every single person that's like above the age of 30 is like,
Flashbacks.
oh yeah, I heard that, whether it's like they heard it from their
Mhm.
grandparents or they heard it from their parents. Like everybody has gotten that line, which
Yep.
basically means don't cry. It's not okay to cry. So, like, yeah. But anyway, you're right. That is a little bit off topic, but that's okay.
Yeah, so bringing you back, you were
Yeah, yeah,
saying
yeah.
like I like the metaphor that you were using about like going to the emergency room versus like regular doctor care. So keep going with that.
Yes. So what happened was like when I would offer people spiritual readings, they would be like, I need to get in to see you right now. And that's more of comparable to somebody going to the emergency department because it's like, oh, it's gotten so bad. Now I've got versus somebody going and getting like the regular medical care. I see it more as so I do the Consciously Awesome Gnostic Adventure. It's Sheila Applegate's life coaching program, but it's really also a spiritual mentoring program, and it allows people to tap into their own intuition, connect with other people spiritually. It's a really cool program, and that's really more my passion now because I want people to see like you are intuitive and I want you to be able to tap into your own intuition. So you're not like emailing me or calling me because you're in a crisis
Mm-hmm.
when really you have the answer inside of you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why I had kind of like gotten away from readings because, or there would be some people that would be like, how did my dad die? And I'm like, you don't know how your dad died? I was like, no, I know how he died. I want you to tell me, how did he die? And I'm like,
Oh, do a
well,
trick.
if
Yeah.
you know how he died, then why are you asking me that question? Like I was literally like this, like like I had no idea why she was even asking me that question, because typically when people come to me for a reading, like they already pretty much believe it. So they're not really skeptical.
Hmm.
So to have somebody be like, because I'm almost like that's a waste of your money. Like
Yeah.
if you're, you know,
Just trying to prove something. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, if you already know, because to me, I'm like, there's a thousand other questions you could ask me. You're going to ask me, like, how did my dad die, when you already know that answer, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Did
I
that
like
answer your
what
question?
it did. And I like what you're saying because I also hold that belief of like everybody is intuitive. Some people are maybe born a little bit more open than others, but like I feel like everybody can, you know, do things to enhance their intuition. I know for myself, like I believe I was born an empath. I was just always feeling everybody's emotions, which
Mhm.
you and Lauren helped me figure out that's what I was, which I appreciate so much. But
There's a name for that.
there's a name for that. I'm not crazy. That's exactly what happened. Um, but since like going on my own journey and learning Reiki and working in the Akashic records, like my intuition is much stronger than it was before. And
Yeah.
so that was work that I did that helped open those things up.
It
So
just
I
opened.
agree with
Yes.
you.
Yeah. So it's almost like the door, we all have these doors, and with our intuition, well, let's call them our intuitive doors. And then all it takes is like a little bit of knocking on those doors and they'll open up. And then all of those intuitive gifts are right there at your disposal. So and I think there's ways to kind of stay in that centered space, like doing meditation and yoga, slowing down, resting. We don't rest enough in our society, and you can see that. And that's why I think people get into that mode. Well, we know it as therapists as, it's their stress response, right? Like their
Hmm.
nervous system is in overdrive and they're in fight or flight all the time. So it's very, very hard to be in an intuitive, like in a space to receive intuitive messages for yourself and for others if you are in that, like, so that's why I'm all like, let's get off the hamster wheel. Like, let's kind of, because you're not going to be able to receive those messages when, if you're
Right.
on that hamster wheel or if you're in fight or flight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, okay. So let me tell you some other little stories here. So when my parents divorced when I was 19, and then they sold our house and we moved into an apartment building that my parents owned, and my parents like remodeled. So we were all like on the second and third floor, and it was my mom and my brother and I. And there was some weird shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but it was just
You
so
are.
weird. I mean, not like because to me, it's like the stuff you see in the movies. I'm like, I just don't like, there was no like flickering lights or like nothing like that. Right. But there was, um, so my brother was in one bedroom and I was in another bedroom, and we were right next to each other. And there would be nights where we would literally be fighting of who is going to sleep downstairs on the couch, because looking back, I'm like, shit, neither one of us wanted to go and
Hmm.
sleep in those bedrooms. Like, so he never said anything to me, but it was just an example like that where he's like, I'm not, no, 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 like I'm sleeping on the couch. And I'm like, I want to sleep on the couch. And so then he moved out. He moved to Albany, continuing ed stuff. And then I ended up taking his room because it was bigger and had a bigger window. Oh my gosh, you guys, there would be nights where like I would wake up and there would be like a woman like standing beside my bed, um in the closet. Oh god, the closet. It was like this little closet, but the ceiling like went down at a
Hmm.
slant. And oh my god, like thinking back to it, it was really hard to kind of go back there because that was very traumatic. Like I know trauma looks different for everybody, but it's that it's the first time I thought about it in a really, really long time, like, 20 years. So so I remember my shoes were in the back part of that closet. And I remember thinking like, okay, like I gotta get those shoes. And I remember like not wanting to go. And it wasn't a huge closet, but it was the fact that like with every bone in my body, I was like, this is not a good idea. Nothing like bad happened per se. It was just that feeling of like something was really, really off in that space. And and I never didn't talk to my mom about it. But I remember one night, like I called my boyfriend. I was the only one in the apartment and I was like crying and I'm like, I just do not want to stay here. I don't want to be alone. I was just sobbing and he was like, you can come to my place, So I drove, he was like 40 minutes away. I drove to his place and I just was like, this is real. It was just really creepy. Just a really, really off, not good energy. And plus seeing like, I don't know, the old lady a couple of times was enough to really freak me out. And not a good energy, not a good, definitely not a being of light. And so I went away to college after that summer. Like it was such a brief period of time. It was like June, July, and a little bit of August, but it was just like, and I was like sleeping with like music on. I was sleeping with a fan on. That was really the first time in my life that I felt like I needed to sleep with some kind of sound on. And also like I had like almost like a lava lamp type thing going too. And so there I am. I'm 19. I'm still scared of the dark. But so I go away to college and my parents, my mom ends up moving out and buying a house, but she kept the apartment complex. And so a family, not like a full family, but family is family, whatever. I digress. It was a guy and maybe a son or maybe two sons. Okay. Because it was a 3-bedroom apartment. And the guy calls my mother, who's, the landlord at the time, and is like, what was he saying? It was like, they were freaked. They were like, I don't know what kind of shit you've got. I mean, I don't even know what exactly they said, but it was like, I don't know what you've got going on. Like, basically they were, I don't know if they were accusing my mom of being into some kind of like weird voodoo shit, but my mom was like, one, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Two, my kids slept in those bedrooms. So I really don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then my mom calls me when I'm at college and she's like, was there something going on? Like these people are like demanding their security deposit back. Like they are ready to move out. And they did move out. They moved out really freaking fast, you guys. Like they left like dishes and they left quite a bit of stuff.
Wow.
Like it really looked like they left in a hurry.
It was
because
just time
I think
to go.
they did. What's that?
It was just time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Time to go. Exactly. So then I said to my mom, like, well, yeah, actually there was like a kind of a creepy old woman. I saw her a couple of times. That's why I never wanted to sleep up there. And my mom was like, what? Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, what would we have done about it? Like, and so, so that was that. Yeah. So
do you still see ghosts?
So, talking about the third eye being open versus being closed, I keep it closed unless I'm doing an intuitive reading and then I open it up because I know my experience. I know my previous experience as a teenager seeing stuff. And so for me, it's like, I really need to,
Not be wide open.
I keep it closed. Probably the hardest thing was when I had first given birth to my daughter in 2015. And we're going to talk about some of Eliana's little ghost stories too in a little bit here. But segue. So I had just given birth to her in 2015, and having a baby, it's a level of sleep deprivation that's indescribable. I mean, you really can't, people told me, they're like, sleep now, because when the baby comes. I mean, I was like, yeah, whatever. Oh, well, that was a warning. I didn't know that. Babies really should come with a warning label. I was so sleep deprived. I was seeing shit everywhere. I mean, there was somebody standing next to me. I remember at one point I was holding the baby. I was holding Eliana in her room. And I knew that there was a presence in that room with me. And I was like, you need to leave. You need to get out of here. Like, I knew that this wasn't like great grandpa coming to visit, because I can feel kind of those energies and know that it's a family member that's crossed over or passed on, versus like a negative energy that's an unwelcome energy. And I was like, and somebody had told me that a long time ago, that like, and this isn't to freak people out, but just to, I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But they had said like sometimes negative energies can be attracted to infants because of like essentially that sense of innocence, or like the soul newness, etc., new life. And so I was like, I was like yelling. And my husband's going, are you okay in there? I'm like, I'm fine. And I'm like burning sage and, doing all this stuff. And that presence, I didn't feel it again. But I remember I was in the rocking chair and I just had a feeling. I was like, I can tell there's somebody in the freaking room and it's freaking me out. And I was like, you need to leave. I was like, get out. It wasn't really a rational conversation. It was more of like the mama bear in me wanting to protect my new baby. But yeah, those are the times where I can really see more, is when I'm really tired. Like if I'm really sleep deprived, I see all kinds of stuff, especially out of my peripheral vision. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's like,
Not today.
the boundary that you've created, you don't have
Yeah.
enough energy to kind of keep that up. But I did want you,
100%.
if you feel okay with it, like explain, how do you close your third eye?
So for me, it's a visualization process. So I imagine, when it's open, that it's a circle. And then when it's closed, I imagine turning it the other direction, and then it has an X on it. And I would recommend that for anybody. Like if
Okay.
you want to be like, right. So you go to a spiritual retreat or something and you're like, I want to be open for this. Like I'm ready. And then just imagine turning it on. Or maybe you imagine a light switch there and then you turn it off when you're done.
Yeah, so it's really just a visualization and an intention.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to hear about Eliana's stories?
Yes, we sure do.
Okay, great. So my sister-in-law passed away when Eliana was 2 years old. So my daughter Eliana, her aunt Gabrielle had taken care of her from the time that she was a little baby. So I, typical American, you get your 12 weeks of maternity leave. And then I was back to work, and Gabrielle was really my saving grace, because she was like, I can take care of her. She wasn't working at the time. It worked out wonderfully. And they had a really great bond. And then Gabrielle passed away, I want to say maybe 2 months after my daughter had turned 2. And after she passed, this is interesting. So my husband's family, they talk a lot about events. They don't talk a lot about feelings. And so it was like the big elephant in the room was that, Gabrielle had died. And so anytime Eliana would bring her up or would talk about her aunt, everyone would be like, shh, like almost like, so the whole family would be like, no, no, shh, no, Eliana, don't say that. I think it was just to not upset my brother-in-law, who was deeply, deeply grieving the sudden loss of his wife. And they absolutely were deeply in love with each other. But Eliana would be in the living room having whole conversations. This is between the ages of 2, 3, and 4. Whole conversations, like looking at the couch, talking. And I'd walk in and very casually, Eliana, who are you talking to? She goes, Aunt Ayla, because she called her Ayla. That was her nickname. And I was like, okay. And then sometimes I would just ask her, I'm like, did you see Aunt Ayla today when we were at Uncle Scott's? And she goes, yeah, I see her every time we go. Or there was a couple of times where she'd go upstairs and she'd go, she'd come back down and she'd be playing and she'd go, Mommy, how come Aunt Ayla's upstairs and we're all downstairs? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe she just wanted to stay up there. It wasn't like, she's a ghost. It was more of like, I really believe that children, like the veil is very thin. And I believe that children see a lot of things that we don't see. And in this case, seeing and hearing. But there would be a lot of different, I can count multiple times that Eliana would be talking to her aunt, talking about her aunt, between those ages, 2, 3, and 4. And then it shifted. And I don't know if it shifted because there was COVID and there was a span of time that we weren't going over there as much. And then I reminded Eliana of this pretty recently because now she's 8 years old. And I'm like, do you remember when you used to talk to Aunt Ayla when you were little? And so she was like, I don't remember. I don't remember her. And I was like, wow, like that was like, oh, because they were so close and they had such a connection. So that was kind of hard to hear, but it was really sweet. Like, and I think I was facilitating some of that because I wasn't shutting it down.
Right.
And I think as a parent, it's really important that as long as that energy is really good and kind and peaceful and loving, absolutely welcome it, because, and even look through old family photo albums because you would be surprised the number of times that children will go, oh, I know him, or, oh, that's Pop, or that's so-and-so. And, so they have this whole family that we're, a lot of us are grieving the loss of someone, and yet they can very easily carry on that connection, which is really cool. I love that.
Why do you think the veil is thinner for kids?
Maybe because there's more of a sense of innocence, and maybe it's because they haven't been jaded by all the earthly shit.
Yeah.
Or and also like at the age of 2, she's very innocently like having these conversations with her aunt. I wasn't shutting it down. Right. So if I had been like, this isn't okay, or like, she's not here, or she's not real. Like if I had said any of those things, then those conversations and that relationship would have been a lot harder for her to continue.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a difference too. Like I remember Eliana being like, because when her great grandmother, my grandmother, passed away, and she was like, no, Mom, Grandma Great, she's in heaven. She's up there. She's far away. And I said, but you just told me 2 days ago that she was in the car with us and you were talking with her. So I said, honey, maybe it's that her soul is so big that she can be, and it's like magic. She can be in multiple places or a lot of different places at one time. But she was so like, Eliana was so confused because like her big cousin, who's such a sweetheart, was like telling her that heaven was far away and like heaven's up in the clouds. And then it was really like confusing my daughter because she's like, but if she's there, then how is she?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because she can be everywhere. Because it's magic. I was like, it's like magic, like a unicorn, like it's really, I mean, when you start to believe stuff, it's like it really is like you start to see how limiting some of these beliefs are that people
Mm-hmm.
have. And when you start to really expand it a little bit, it's like somebody was just telling me the other day that in certain languages, they there is no word for the color pink. And once you tell someone of, I don't know, I thought maybe it was Spanish, but I could be wrong. Once you tell someone whose first language is Spanish, like, oh, that's the color pink,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden they see pink everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to not having a word for that color,
Mm-hmm.
they don't see it. They don't recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see it as a color.
Right. You can't
So,
attach a meaning to it if you don't have a word for it.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when so if we start to see like, or say like, hey, maybe there's colors like maybe that we've never even seen before, we start to expand our beliefs a little bit and we start to see more and experience more. We start to experience the wonder of life because we have more of that openness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Very interesting.
yeah. And then there's another story too, with Eliana. So we're at my parents' house, and my parents have a picture of my grandma and grandpa, and they're between the ages of 55 and 65 in the picture. And Eliana had never met her great grandfather on the earthly level, I guess you could say, because he passed away in 2001 and then, or 2002, I think it was. But anyway, and so she looks at that picture. This was like just a few weeks ago. I think it was like Labor Day weekend or something. She looks at that picture and she points to her great grandfather and she goes, "Oh, that's the man that I always see on the top at the top of the stairs." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's cool."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Do you talk to him?" And she's like, "Yeah, I say hi and he says hi back." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool."
At this point, does she recognize that it is a spirit, or does she think that it is an alive person?
No, she has an awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't put like a word to it. Like I don't say
Mm-hmm.
it's a ghost or a spirit, but
Mm-hmm.
she definitely has an awareness
Mm-hmm.
to
This
like,
is different than a person who is physically here.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that not only are you not the only person who has told us that their kids have looked at pictures of people and said, I I've spoken to this person. You're actually not the first person this week that has told us that.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Starting to make those connections.
Definitely. I mean, we hear that. You hear that all the time when people are talking about like children being more sensitive, but it is interesting just to
Mhm.
hear like personal stories of I really do think there is something there. There is a thinner veil, and that's why I asked you that question of like why do you think that is? Because not that any one of us has the definite answer, but
Right.
it's interesting to think about like there is a difference between young
Mhm.
children and adults, and something that happens. But I mean, I do lean towards, I mean, you're doing a fabulous job with Eliana of keeping her open and just supporting it and just letting it be natural, and it's not weird, it's not scary, but society itself can shut, I think, people down,
Mhm.
of thinking that it's weird or scary or, you're crazy because I can't see that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she kind of got into a little bit of a pickle at school when she was in first grade because I was like, we're Irish and I don't know what I was even thinking. Like I think I told her that we descended from like leprechauns or something. So like we were leprechauns too. I don't don't even know what I was thinking when I said that. So she goes to school and she tells everybody that she's a leprechaun. And that, because we're Irish and, of course, like my mom told me I'm a leprechaun. So of course I'm a leprechaun. And then the kids at school were like, no, you're not. And they were kind of making fun of her. And I was like, oh no. And then her teacher was like, honey, you're not a leprechaun. I don't know why your mom told you. I mean, her mom and her teacher was super sweet, but it was like, there are still moments where if Eliana's like really upset with me, you know how sometimes when people are really mad, they'll like bring up stuff from the past. And that is something that she brings up. And I'll never forget the day that you told me that we were leprechauns and I went to school and told everybody and then we weren't leprechauns. And why would you do that to me? And I was like, okay, you know what? Sometimes mom fail. Like sometimes we make
Yeah.
big mistakes. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I think part of it is I don't even know. I don't know why I told her that. I think it was St. Patrick's Day. I was having fun. I was like,
Yeah. You're being goofy, not thinking that she's going to take it literally, but at that
yeah,
age, everything
exactly.
is literally what you said.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, uh,
Yeah.
but I think it is definitely easier for her to see and experience things because she lives in a, a home where we're very open to things and we
Mm-hmm.
have open dialogue about stuff like we go to church. I take her to Sunday school and I'm like, listen, some of these stories are like other stories where somebody just made something up. I'm like, I don't really think God turned that lady into a pillar of salt. I'm just saying, I don't think that actually happened. I think that that was one of those made up pretend stories. And I said, and some of those stories in the Bible, those are real, but some of them aren't real. So, you decide. And I mean, I don't know. They asked me if I wanted to be a member of the church and I told them what I told her and they were still like okay with it. So I was like, okay. I mean, because for me, like, I don't know if it's a rite of passage. Like for me, I want her to know some of those Bible stories, like the whole David and Goliath thing or like Noah and the ark. Like I think some of those stories are really freaking cool. And it's also hard nowadays to find a community of people that's all different ages. And her Sunday school teacher is an older woman. She's in her 70s and she's just salt of the earth nice. And she really cares about the kids. And so I want her to have that experience. So, and I like to sing in the choir. So I'm like, hey, that's why I'm. So it is kind of, we can build on her spiritual beliefs and explore those things at home. And I do talk to her about stuff. I'm like, this is what I believe. And you can believe whatever you want to believe. And I'm letting you know right now that there's certain people that don't believe that stuff, or they might believe that that's not okay. But I'm letting you know, I think it's okay. And you can believe whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want to believe. So we really try to encourage those conversations. Um, yeah. And an openness. So
I think that's really cool too. It's like, I'm going to give you the menu and you can pick what feels right for
yeah.
you off of this menu. I'm not telling you exactly what it is that you have to believe, but I'm telling you, here's the options.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
there you
great.
go. Exactly. A plethora of spiritual beliefs. Choose wisely.
How would you say your intuitive abilities play a role in your like daily life now?
As far as being a therapist and meeting with people individually, I maybe this is because I've been a therapist for over 10 years, but I think there's an intuitive knowing within it. So I
Mm-hmm.
just like see someone or connect with someone and a lot of times people are like, are you following me? Like, I feel like I'm all over the place today, or I feel like I can't. And I'm like, I am following you. Like, we are on this journey. And to me, like, that's my intuition doing the work or
Mm-hmm.
moving with the client in
Mm-hmm.
those areas.
Yeah. It's like you're tracking the energy. It's,
Oh,
more than the words almost. Yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah. And, or like, I'm thinking something and then the client says it,
Mm-hmm.
or vice versa. There's the kind of there is that connection that exists without trying. I don't put any effort into that at all. That's
Mm-hmm.
just that's fun.
Absolutely.
I think that it's very interesting that you basically, in your teen years, going back to the first part of the conversation, kind of, um, it seems like you kind of had two different initiatory experiences with two very different types of people, and you had, your initial initiation into the type of thing you're talking about was through someone who had an idea of that, some sort of, psychic phenomenon one way or another through a prop. And, you were initiated to the idea through that with the idea of, someone's piece of jewelry. And then after a couple of years, it almost, you initiated to another level where you no longer needed that. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah. I think it's like the classic thing that you think of, like with the woman with the crystal ball, or somebody that's doing tarot or tea leaves, or they're reading tea leaves, or they're, taking a piece of somebody's jewelry. I think all of that is just a vessel to be
Mm-hmm.
able to say, like, I'm ready to receive this information and give this information to this person
Mm-hmm.
who is also in a space of receiving it. That's so, like, I'm telling you, once I was like, wait, maybe I don't need this person's jewelry anymore. Like, I think it was Sheila Applegate that had said that, where she was like, the person is in the room with you, like,
Mm-hmm.
or the person's on the phone with you. Can you feel their energy? Can you connect with them? Do you really need to hold a piece of their jewelry? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh. Or even there are some psychics that are like, oh, bring me, show me a picture of your husband, or show me a picture of, I don't need to do any of that. I can already see all of it. Like, I already know
Mm-hmm.
what your I already know what your son or your brother or whoever looks like, because I can see them in my mind.
So you are clairvoyant. You can actually see
Yes.
in your mind's eye. Okay.
Yes. And in the early days when I did readings, I I would actually see the words in my mind, like exactly what I was supposed to be saying, which is so odd. I don't see that anymore. And then I typically see people's lives like I'm watching a movie screen
Mm-hmm.
in my mind. So, and the only instances of um clairaudience, I don't even know if that's a word. I just made it up. But hearing is, I was studying abroad in Australia, and I heard my mother's name as if she was right next to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry, I heard my mother say my name, Chantel. And I was like, so like, I got on the phone with the calling card and all that stuff. And I was like, are you okay? Like, is that, and she was like, yeah, it's the middle of the night. I'm sleeping. Like, it was so, I still don't know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard my voice a few different times, very close to my ear.
Your own voice.
My own, like someone saying my name. I've
Oh,
heard
okay.
my mother's voice say
Mm-hmm.
my name at least two different times. And then there was another time, maybe I was dreaming. I don't even know when this happened, but it was like, because my grandmother passed away a couple years ago, but like I heard her say my name.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell you if that was in a dream or if that was like me in my kitchen. But I was like, whoa. And it startles you. It's like, okay, am I supposed to play the lotto now? Like, what is, you know?
What are you trying to tell me? You got my attention.
Give me the damn lotto numbers. Well, that's what.
Yeah, everybody wants when they come to you for a reading.
Actually, I've got a great story. Not having to do with ghost stories, but I saw these numbers over and over and over again in my mind. This is like early on. I was like 18. And I was in college and I'm like, I just kept seeing these numbers. And then I literally was like, I went over to the wall calendar and I was like, just tell me what day. And my hand like pointed. I don't play around with this shit now because I don't know who told me this. And I don't know. I'm like, I'm not even going to play in that sorcery. But at the time I was 18, I was like, well, let's see what happens. And then I open up my app and I'm like, okay, that day. So I like start it on the wall calendar because this is before phones and all of that. I went down to Stewart's which is a convenience store. And so I play, it's like the pick four, like the Yolanda Vega that would do the right. Like, so the ball would be flying around. I had never even, I don't think besides a scratch off, I had never played the lottery before. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, so the woman probably thought like, what is this about? Cause I'm like, I need to play these exact numbers. So I bought it and I won $75.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now I'm like, and then I was like, I'm not doing that again. I don't know why. I was like, it was a fluke. Cause my brother was like, how did you win that? And I was like, I don't know. The numbers just came to me. And he's like, are there any other numbers coming to you?
Yeah, why couldn't you get a couple more?
But that's
funny.
the only time. And that's all, but that's also the only time that like it was really in my head, like
Yeah.
play these numbers. So
Yeah.
I went with it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'll, have fun at the casino a little bit, but it's not like I'm not like walking away with thousands of dollars. It's literally like, like click on the left or click on the,
Mm-hmm.
bet up, bet down. The thing I've noticed, like when we played, what's the one that spins and it's like the black and is it roulette?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the last time my husband and I were at the casino, he's like, oh, let's go play that. I was like, all right. Because usually we just do the slots. It's just kind of fun. And we only go a couple times a year. But I kept like hearing numbers in my mind. Then I go to set down a chip on a number, like say it was like number 16. And the woman right next to me would put like right before I was about to. And I'm like, shit, I can hear her numbers in my mind. It was wild.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
So
you're
then
picking up on her energy rather
I was,
than the winning
yeah.
energy.
Yeah, because it's not like when those numbers are floating around in your mind at the casino, it's not like it's like, this is the winning one. No, because again, like if intuitive readers or psychics or clairvoyants, like if the winning numbers were coming to us, wouldn't we all be like gazillionaires and we would be
Mhm.
just shutting it all down? Like I'm on a beach somewhere having a margarita. Like there wouldn't be. And then we wouldn't be helping people or, giving people something to think about or talk about. So, but yeah, that's my little lottery story.
It's a good one. Is there anything you do to protect your energy?
So I mean, there are people out there that kind of suck our energy, or deplete us, right? And just as there are people who have a very warm presence and they add energy to us, they give us something. So what I do is I used to imagine that I would like wear a robe. Like I would like just imagine it. Like, okay, the robe is on and therefore I'm like protected. But then nothing really goes out and nothing really comes in either. So that wasn't exactly the kind of what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to also imagine, I've played around with this over the years. Archangel Michael has blue energy. Um, like if you feel like there's a negative presence, call in Archangel Michael, say a little prayer, however you want to say it, and call in and imagine his sword and imagine the blue fleck light, which is like a blue shimmery light, wrapped around you, wrapped around, the entity and or just around the room, right? So if you ever need like some extra protection. But I also imagine a faucet turned on over myself and that energy, that, beautiful white liquid light, or just sometimes I just feel different colors. I'm like, oh, let's do purple today, or let's do pink, or, gold, silver, and white, and then I imagine the other person, um, and there's a faucet over their head, and that's, oh, my dog's coming in. Um, and then I imagine the other person also has a faucet over them, and that the liquid light is pouring over them. And when I do that, it's just because it's giving them what they need, but it's also giving me what I need too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I do. If there's tension between myself and somebody else, I call in the violet flame. I think that's Saint Germain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just I mean, you can Google violet flame and there's some beautiful images. Like if you want to get the image in your mind of like that purple,
Mm-hmm.
pink and white flame. So sometimes I'll just wrap myself in that other person, in that energy or in that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do. I burn sage sometimes, like typically like in the fall, I feel like we all get a little like, ooh, so I'll get, dust it off and take that out. And then the kids are like, that house smells weird. And I'm like, well,
Mommy's just
wow.
burning some sage. It's fine.
No. It's all good. Yeah, this has been great.
It has been great. I loved hearing all of your stories. I knew it would be a very interesting conversation, just knowing you and knowing, that you do have a pretty good intuitive sense. So thank you for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, not a problem. It felt really good to kind of open it up again. And
Yeah.
Good deal. Thanks
yeah,
for talking with us
great.
for sure.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Of course. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.